Did I never happen?
Old Nashville loved to sell a clean story, steel guitars shining under stage lights, rhinestones catching every camera flash. But the backstage ledger told a different tale. If you follow the money, the marriages, and the managers, you find power games, bruised trust, and careers steered by fear. Today we're digging through that underbelly, not to worship legends, but to look straight at the wreckage they left behind and the people who had to live with it. Keep the lights low. What you're about to hear isn't the glossy museum tour, it's the creaking hallway when the tour guide goes home. The empire of Western swing once crowned a king who ruled with violence. Spade Cooley had the TV fame, the orchestra, the swagger, and a private life that reads like a horror file. His temper didn't stop at yelling. It escalated into torture and then into a crime so brutal it shocked even a scandal-hardened industry. The verdict stripped him of the crown, but the damage he did didn't magically end with a judge's gavel. It remained with the daughter who saw more than any child ever should, and with a community that learned how easily charm can camouflage cruelty. People kept spinning the old records. Fewer wanted to reread the court transcripts. The truth sat there anyway, heavy as a stage monitor. The outlaw image looks cool on a t-shirt until it becomes a police report. Johnny Paycheck built a career on defiance, the blue-collar snarl, the ultimate take-this-job jab. Off-stage, the chaos didn't clock out. Barroom bravado turned into gunfire and bravado turned into prison time. Everyone loves a redemption arc, but the quieter part of the story is what never gets measured. The fear in the room when the temper went off, the ordinary people who walked away rattled, and the fans who learned the hard way that stardom doesn't mean safety. The myth says a wild heart just needs taming. The reality says a wild heart with a weapon is a nightmare no hook can fix. Some men hid cruelty behind jokes, others hid it behind shock lyrics and stage grit. David Allan Coe sold controversy like merch, pushing buttons with glee and daring people to be offended. The problem wasn't only the words, it was the pattern, the way contempt sprayed beyond stage antics and into real relationships, leaving collaborators scorched and critics divided between "that's just the act" and "no, that's who he is." Nashville loves a provocateur because provocation sells records, but there's a line between fearless and corrosive. When you make a career out of trampling people, you can't be surprised when the footprints lead right back to you. Some stories are so sad they come with their own echo. Faron Young could charm an arena and then turn vicious in private. Alcohol lit the fuse and the fuse ran fast. Partners told of physical rage, of hands that didn't respect the person they touched, of nights that ended in terror instead of applause. The headlines eventually wrote themselves. The ending came with a final act people still whisper about in delicate euphemisms out of respect for his family. What matters isn't a poetic exit. It's the trail of fright that made even friends choose their words, like they were crossing broken glass. Fame kept the spotlight warm. It didn't warm the rooms where people hid until shouting stopped. There's the haunted genius whose widow looked like a bruised ghost in every rumor. Hank Williams Sr. wrote pain into melodies anyone can hum, but the domestic storms around him were relentless. Booze wasn't a subplot, it was a co-star that ruined gigs, wrecked trust, and pushed the people closest to him to the breaking point. The industry romanticized the tortured poet and pretended that suffering was the cost of art. That's a scam. The magic in the songs didn't need the bottle. The people around him didn't need to pay for his legend with their piece. The jukebox doesn't tell you who drove home shaking. Every time someone says, "Rockabilly Rebel," another family album sighs. Jerry Lee Lewis became a tabloid before tabloids were cool, detonating careers and marriages with the same hands that pounded the piano. The teenage bride, the scandal, the tour that imploded, the accusations that followed. This wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern of dominance and harm that rippled across years. The photographs show a grin. The court filings show everything that grin tried to swallow. In the shadow of a legend, bravery often looked like a woman finally leaving and never looking back. If you want to understand what control looks like in Rhinestones, study the public love story that dissolved into threats, stalked by a bottle. George Jones could sing a heart into ribbons, but his rages were notorious. Tammy Wynette became both muse and punching bag in the public imagination, the angelic voice on stage, the woman dodging a storm at home. Fans romanticized the hurt as if pain gave the record's depth. The truth is simpler and uglier. Fear is not a marketing strategy, and violence is not a chorus. Country like to package suffering as authenticity. The real authenticity is naming what happened and refusing to clap for it. Then there was the polished producer who shaped a style like a puppeteer shapes a smile. Billy Sherrill pared country down to satin and strings, selling a virtue costume to the masses. It wasn't just music. It was image engineering, telling women exactly how to sound, look, and behave to keep the radio chirping. That kind of control didn't always stay in the studio. When the people behind the console dictate the person behind the microphone, production starts to look like possession. The catalog sparkled. The contracts sometimes looked like cages embroidered with gold thread. The scariest story is the one the industry couldn't or wouldn't explain. Tammy Wynette's infamous claim about a kidnapping became a riddle that split Nashville into camps: believers, doubters, and the exhausted in the middle who only wanted the fear to stop. Was it a staged cover for bruises? Was it a real terror Nashville didn't want to solve? The paper trail never gave a clean answer. What we do know is that whispers replaced help and brand protection beat truth to the finish line. When a woman says she's not safe, the correct response isn't a memo. It's a door that locks from the inside and someone to stand watch. Merle Haggard wore outlaw like a comfortable jacket, and the jacket came with stains. He could be tender in one verse and terrifying after last call, marrying, divorcing, and burning bridges like driftwood. He admitted to ugliness as casually as other stars admitted to influences. Fights with lovers, behavior he later sounded ashamed of, decisions he tried to file under, "I was a different man then." Maybe. But then has consequences that keep walking long after the apology. The record stayed classic. The memories stayed complicated. Control didn't always carry a pistol. Sometimes it wore a smile and a matching outfit. Porter Wagoner helped make Dolly Parton a household name and then fought like a businessman who thought he owned the household. Contracts became shackles, mentoring turned into manipulation, and the good old boy handshake came with strings you couldn't see from the cheap seats. Dolly wrote her way out, but not everyone had a melody strong enough to pry open the door. For every superstar who escaped, there were dozens who learned the lesson quietly. Talent doesn't protect you from a partner who treats your career like property. The man in black kept a stash, broke vows, and left wreckage he later tried to clean. Johnny Cash is a redemption story told in American churches, rehab centers, and playlists. But the redemption only matters if we admit the damage. He went on binges that left partners scrambling, made choices that cut deep, and let little bottles and big appetites run the itinerary. Later, he stood in the bright, making amends where he could. The lesson isn't to cancel a complicated man, it's to stop calling chaos romance. A great voice doesn't automatically come with great judgment. That part has to be learned, and sometimes it arrives too late for the people who needed it most. The heir to a legend turned his surname into a cudgel. Hank Williams Jr. built a brand on swagger and outrage, spitting out lines that bruised entire groups and roaring on stage like a brawler looking for a fight. Some nights it was just noise, other nights it drifted into something uglier, performances that crashed, rants that treated cruelty like comedy, audiences that left feeling slimed instead of stirred. There's a thin line between a wild show and a hostile room. When a mic becomes a weapon, it isn't entertainment anymore. It's a warning siren with a backbeat. Gentleman Jim sounded smooth on the radio, but there were whispers about how gentlemen played out behind closed doors. Jim Reeves was meticulous about his sound, his image, his business. Some called it professionalism, some called it control. Young women in the orbit learned quickly that saying no to a powerful man in that era could mean a career that never got past the lobby. Whether it was stern coaching or domineering control, the pattern felt familiar. A star who treated people as arrangement notes to be moved, not as humans with their own tempos. The Gatekeepers smiled on camera and cut throats off it. Ralph Emery became the face of country TV nights, but artists told stories about payback, cold shoulders, and informal blacklists that could freeze a career faster than a bad single. Power in Nashville didn't just book you, it booked you out, and a cruel quip on air could stick to your name like gum on a boot. A soft couch, a bright set, and a host with a long memory. That's not hospitality, that's leverage disguised as charm. The charmer with the toothy grin and the turquoise rings could go mean without warning. Marty Robbins dazzled crowds, raced cars, and carried himself like a hero out of his own ballads. But the temper stories never fully died, and colleagues described a man who could switch from generous to hard-edged in a breath. Stardom amplifies whatever's already there. If insecurity lived under the suit, it came out as control. Tight reins on sessions, on schedules, on people who were supposed to be partners, not props. Success doesn't absolve a sharp edge, it sharpens it. One old radio story goes like this. A singer gets pulled off the road and into a county lockup over a handful of rolled leaves. Texas Tyler didn't invent the vice, and he wouldn't be the last to get chained to it. The slow roll from party to arrest to public apology is an old song in itself. What made it ugly wasn't the smoke, it was the erratic behavior, the rants, the meanness to bandmates, the insults tossed at fans when the buzz turned sour. When your habit turns you into someone stranger's fear, art becomes collateral damage. Call the leaves cannabis if you like. The fallout had other names. Canceled gigs, broken trust, a hollowed-out career. Another chart topper perfected the double life. Webb Pierce looked like money and sang like it too, guarding his spot with the obsession of a man who thought success was a zero-sum game. Plenty of people called him generous, plenty of others called him jealous and exploitative, especially with young women who came looking for a chance and found a toll booth instead. The machine he helped build rewarded winners and swallowed the rest. When mentorship turns into control and favors turn into IOUs that never end, glitter starts to look like handcuffs that happen to shine. And hovering over all of this were the nameless hands, the power brokers who built empires in offices without windows. They decided who got airplay, who got buried, whose bruises didn't fit the narrative, and whose confessions got reshaped into publicity angles. They hushed up police reports, rewrote press notes, and told young artists to keep quiet if they ever wanted a career. These weren't villains in a movie. They were neighbors in good suits, the people everyone thanked on stage while whispering complaints into the dressing room sink. The system isn't a mystery. It's 100 small decisions that all tilt the same direction. There's a reason the same myths keep getting recycled. They sell. Temperamental genius, hard-living outlaw, tough love mentor. None of those phrases cover the screams in a hotel hallway, the surgeon's bills, the contracts that smothered a rising voice, or the kid who watched a parent become a headline. Saying the quiet part out loud doesn't erase the music. It just stops rewarding the monsters who hid under it. And it faces something else too. The bystanders, the bandmates who heard the fights and looked away, the executives who calculated risk and chose profit over people, the audience that laughed off the warning signs because the chorus slapped. If this sounds bleak, good. The point of dragging the lights into dark corners isn't to rub faces in the dust. It's to name what was broken so it can't be hidden behind folklore again. Every time a star's meltdown gets repackaged as passion, someone nearby gets taught that their pain is the price of art. That's a lie. The price of art is time, care, and skill. The price of abuse is borne by victims. Those two ledgers should never be confused. So where does that leave Nashville, old Nashville, the one stitched together with Opry programs and backroom deals? It leaves it with responsibility. To stop turning violence into gossip. To stop treating control as mentorship. To stop telling women to be grateful for a shot that comes with strings around their throats. It means praising the music without embalming the men who hurt people to make it. It means believing the assistant who says she's not safe. It means money going to counseling before it goes to another clever marketing video. It means remembering that a platinum plaque doesn't absolve a pattern. It documents the period when people looked away. There's a different story waiting, the one where icons still exist, but not at the expense of everyone orbiting them. You can love a classic record and still admit that the room it was recorded in was dangerous. You can sing along to a chorus while promising you'll never excuse the hands that harmed the person who wrote it. You can demand better from the next generation of producers and promoters: transparency, respect, accountability. You can support the artists who put truth into their liner notes and safety riders into their contracts. A better industry isn't a dream, it's a checklist, and it starts with who gets protected when the show ends. Maybe the most radical thing we can do with the old legends is stop letting them be the last word. The people who were silenced, partners, kids, session players, background singers, road managers, fans who never got their refund and left with a bruise, they get the final verse. The ending is not a statue in a hall. It's a standard we hold, a boundary we enforce, a culture we insist on building. Country music is big enough for heartache without glorifying harm, tough enough for honesty without fear of losing the magic. If a myth needs someone to bleed to stay alive, let the myth die. And if you're tallying the vices that fueled this darkness, the ledger isn't shy. Some stories crackle with whispered references to coke, some drift through a haze of cannabis, and others tiptoe around the brown powder that wrecked entire decades. A broken night doesn't grant permission to break people. Art made under the influence can still be art, but it doesn't erase the bruises or the panic texts. The brave ones were the partners who hid car keys, the assistants who stashed hotel numbers for shelters, the friends who said no more and meant it. They turned the tide one small refusal at a time, refusing to confuse legendary with untouchable. There's another side we can't ignore. The quiet heroes. The tour manager who pulled a frightened backup singer out of a hotel hallway. The drummer who refused to play when a partner showed up with a black eye. The label assistant who slipped a phone number for a shelter into a makeup bag. They modeled a different kind of power, the kind that protects instead of praise. And they passed that ethic to a newer wave of artists who now set boundaries with the same confidence they hit high notes. The charts might not list it, but that courage is the real headliner. So here's the uncomfortable truth Nashville had to learn the hard way. A hit single doesn't wash a dirty record. The old machine was built on favors, secrets, and the silence of people who were told they'd never work again if they spoke. We can build something else. We can teach fans to cheer for boundary setting the way they cheer for high notes. We can make festivals where security believes victims first and where dressing rooms come with locks and actual policies that mean something. We can turn industry standard into a phrase that protects the vulnerable instead of protecting the powerful. Call it the great unromanticizing. We don't need saints to love songs, and we don't need devils to sell them. We need grown-ups. The legends in this story built unforgettable music. Nobody's disputing that. But the next generation doesn't have to choose between brilliance and basic decency. Let the old myths fade, let the truth stand, and let the business catch up to the values fans already hold. Country music was born from hard truth poured into melody. It can handle a little more truth now. If it makes a few statues feel smaller, good. The people who had to live through the worst of it deserve the space those statues have been hogging. And for anyone still clinging to the old excuses, remember this: talent explains a record, not a bruise, a threat, or a contract written like a trap. It stands.